few are the games that deserve the title of groundbreaking, and Clock Tower 1 on the Super Nintendo was one of them. If you think I'm exaggerating, stay with me on this one. By the end of this video, I'm sure I'll have changed your mind on this. Released on September 14th, 1995, Clock Tower was one of the very few true horror titles to ever grace the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And there was an aspect of it that was absolutely new to console gamers, but we'll get to that later. Right off the bat, players knew this wasn't an average horror game, not by the time standards. You were put in the shoes of Jennifer Simpson, a young girl whose appearance was strikingly close to Jennifer Connelly's character in the movie Phenomena by Dario Argento. Similar to Resident Evil, which would come out a few years later, the game is set inside a mansion, the Barrows Mansion. Players were made to experience firsthand what facing the horrors of a haunted mansion felt, but not in the shoes of an elite group of people armed to the teeth, but in the shoes of a vulnerable, helpless teenager. There were no weapons you could carry around with you all times, and the puzzle-like nature of the game didn't make things any easier. Danger lurked around every corner. You see, possessed mirrors could attack you, flying dolls could try and off you, and you could also become someone's dinner at a very specific point in the game. Terror lurked around every corner. The developers made sure that the player would never be able to feel truly safe, no matter where they were. You never knew if interacting with an object would give you a new item needed to progress or spring something deadly that could actually kill you. To top it off, there was another element of desperation, the Scissorman. Think of him as a slower version of Nemesis from RE3. Jennifer was unable to do any sort of permanent damage to him, having to oftentimes resort to hiding in unassuming places or worse, obvious ones, which gave her just time enough to dodge this deadly pursuer. Players never knew when he would show up again or how long a chase would last. Add that to the fact that the game has some very impressive pixel art graphics up to this very day, and gamers were set to be scarred for life with this horror masterpiece. But it didn't end there. Actually, ending is our next topic. Unlike most games from that time, and well, today's time too, Clock Tower had several different endings. Some were easy to acquire and would almost certainly be gotten by complete chance. Others required a thorough exploration of the Barrows Mansion to unearth all of its secrets and the dark nature of the events that took place there. It is entirely possible to beat the game thinking, well, that's it, without having actually learned anything substantial about Jennifer, Mary, the Scissorman himself, and even Jennifer's story. But I'll leave it at that, not to spoil things. This made it so that the game had extended replay value. What didn't I see? What did I miss? How do I get all of those other endings? It also made players' imagination run wild, of course. I saw something that made me wonder, and chances are that you'll most likely see more details about it in another ending. And as we get to the groundbreaking element I told you about and my personal favorite, the soundtrack, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to keep the Scissorman away from you and poverty away from me. But hey, in all seriousness, your support is much appreciated. You are the best, and never forget that. Now that you've done that, let's talk about the soundtrack. The game doesn't have that many tracks, but in here it's a matter of quality over quantity, and the tracks it has are awesome. I've used them in several other videos and they are always perfect to set the mood, and they were written almost 30 years ago. However, the absence of variety in the soundtrack department wasn't an oversight, it was a design choice. The game has long stretches where the only thing you hear are footsteps. This put you on high alert and induced paranoia even if you were alone in a highway. Who knows? What could show up at the next corner? What if the Scissorman shows up as I stand here thinking what I'll do next? Brilliant design, I say. Now comes the groundbreaking aspect I told you about. You see, back in 1995, video games and computer games were entirely different universes. There was no dialogue between them. A very different scenario from what we see in today's world where almost everything gets released on every system. And also, having both a console and a PC was a very rare occurrence back then, so you can imagine how new and impactful it was to console players starting the game only to wiggle the D-pad and finding out that Jennifer remained completely static. That's right, this was, if not the first, one of the first incursions of a point-and-click game on the Super Nintendo. PC gamers were used to this, of course, with great titles such as Monkey Island, but many console gamers had never seen that in their entire lives, and this added an even bigger sense of dread. Moving the cursor around wasn't as fast as just walking, even though you could make Jennifer immediately run to either side with the L and R buttons. But even so, it wasn't just a matter of running up to a door or an item and using it. You had to place the cursor above the item or object you wanted to interact with. Doing so with the mouse was easy enough. With the controller, however, well, let's just say that the Scissorman had more than his fill of heads due to this. But I must say, I really don't consider this a flaw. This was deliberate. If you like taking things a little bit deeper, it could give you a perfect sense of how a teenage girl would react in a situation like this. She wouldn't pick up things in time, she'd fumble actions. She wouldn't see things to do or how to save herself before it was too late. You name it, it was all there. So in the end, to this very day, Clock Tower 1 remains as one of my favorite horror games of all time. Not for the novelty aspect in terms of gameplay and consoles, but for the whole complete package. Not to mention, the graphics were super crisp and still look good to this very day. When you put every single aspect of this game together, it made up for one of the most tense horror experiences one could ever have. It's one of those rare cases where the whole absolutely needs all of its pieces to function. Take away one of them, and the rest crumbles. Is it a sign of bad design? Well, quite the contrary, it shows mastery. Every single piece was put there for a reason, to work together in perfect synchronism, just like, well, a clock tower. And now comes the time where I need to ask for your assistance. Making those videos is a lot of fun, I do it with a lot of passion and love for you, but it does take up a lot of time and resources. So if you'd like to support the show, if you'd like to help us keep on going, then I invite you to check out our members club. We have many benefits on different tiers to make sure that you all leave with something special and unique. There are good benefits, there are awesome benefits for every single tier. Alright? So this was Belmont speaking to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next scare. Later.